So, back in August of 2025, Punjab was hit by this absolutely devastating flood. But this story is about so much more than just a natural disaster. We're talking about massive human displacement, a huge government response, and then, of course, this intense political fight over who was really to blame. Let's dig in and piece together how this all went down.
Okay, to really get your head around the scale of this crisis, you have to start with this one number 1.46 million. That's how many people were estimated to have been displaced by these floodwaters. I mean, think about that. An entire population just uprooted, their lives completely turned upside down in just a matter of days.
So, the big question is, how does something this catastrophic even happen? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was basically a perfect storm of different factors that all collided at once. Let's break down exactly what led to this massive deluge. And the impact was just immediate and incredibly widespread. We're talking over 1,000 villages completely inundated. Huge parts of Punjab just disappeared underwater. This really set the stage for one of the biggest challenges the region has had to face in decades. You see, the cause here wasn't just, oh, it rained a lot. It was more like a domino effect, a real chain reaction where one thing triggered the next, and each step just made the whole crisis bigger and bigger until it became this unstoppable force. It really all boiled down to three main stages. So first, you had this unprecedented amount of rain falling directly on Punjab. Then, on top of that, there was a huge monsoon surge in the upstream areas. We're talking Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir, which swelled the major rivers. And the final piece of the puzzle, the real kicker, was the release of surplus water from the big dams. It was necessary, but absolutely devastating. Each step just fed into the next one. So, when we say extreme rainfall, what do we actually mean? Well, in August 2025, Punjab got hit with a staggering 253.7 millimeters of rain. To put that into perspective for you, this wasn't just a rainy month. It was a 25-year high, a full 74% above the normal average. That unbelievable amount of water was really the foundation for this whole crisis. And the consequences of that chain reaction? Absolutely devastating. It wasn't just the villages. Over 61,000 hectares of really vital farmland just went underwater. We're talking about key districts like Gurdaspur, Amritsar, and Firozapur getting hit incredibly hard. It basically crippled the state's entire agricultural heartland. All right, so in the face of all this devastation, a truly monumental response was launched. So let's shift gears a little. We're going to move from the disaster itself to look at the massive coordinated effort to save lives and just manage the immediate chaos. But even in the middle of all this tragedy, there were these incredible moments of success. Look at this number, over 11,330. That's not just a statistic. That represents every single person who was rescued and evacuated from the flood zones. It's a real testament to the scale and the speed of the response on the ground. And this rescue effort wasn't the work of just one group. No way. This was a massive collaboration. You had national forces like the NDRF and the Army working right alongside state and local agencies. And it was a pretty high-tech operation, too. They were deploying drones for surveillance, using amphibious vehicles, helicopters, all the stuff that was absolutely crucial for reaching those really remote, flooded-out areas. At the same exact time, the state government was mobilizing its leadership. The chief minister himself was on the ground, doing aerial surveys, visiting the affected areas. Ministers were sent out to oversee relief operations directly. They formed a high-powered committee to coordinate everything. And of course, they took safety measures like closing schools and setting up 122 relief camps to give shelter to thousands of people. Okay, so you might be wondering, how does a state even begin to calculate all this damage? Well, for that, you need to know this term, special girdawarri. Now, this isn't just a bunch of paperwork. It's a formal government-ordered process to assess the damage. The whole point is to create a transparent, accurate record of everything that was lost, from crops to homes to livestock. It's basically the essential first step before a single rupee of compensation can be paid out. And this whole assessment process was backed up by a very public, very direct promise. The Chief Minister, Bhagwant Mann, he went on the record and said flat out that the government would provide complete compensation for all the damage. Crops, livestock, property, you name it. For hundreds of thousands of people who had just lost everything, that was a crucial promise to hear. No, to actually back up that promise and fund this huge recovery effort, the state had to turn to the central government. They officially appealed for 60,000 crore rupees. That's an enormous sum of money, and they claimed these were funds that were already stuck with the center. It just goes to show you the massive financial toll of a disaster like this.
So, while the rescue operations are still going on and recovery is being planned, something else starts to bubble up. The inevitable next phase, the political reckoning. The search for who was accountable, who was to blame, just ignited this fierce political battle, pitting the state government against, well, pretty much everyone, the center and the opposition.
And the two sides drew their battle lines almost immediately. On one hand, you had the state government. They were pointing the finger squarely at the center-controlled Bakra Bios Management Board, or the BBMB. They claimed that mismanaged dam releases were the final trigger. On the other side, the opposition fired right back. They accused the state government of complete inaction, of ignoring clear warnings that could have made this whole thing less severe.
And the opposition's accusations were really specific and pretty sharp. They claimed the government had just plain ignored official warnings. They called out the chief minister for being absent during key moments, calling it a dereliction of duty. They pointed to failures in how relief was being deployed. And then they brought up a really painful point, that compensation from floods in previous years still hadn't been paid. They even announced plans to take this whole thing to the High Court. So, okay, the floodwaters are starting to recede, but the political battles are just heating up. So what happens next? What does the path forward even look like? Well, there are a few key steps that are really going to define the next chapter of this story for Punjab. All right, the road ahead is pretty clear, but it's definitely not easy. Step 1, that super important special Gurdwari assessment has to be completed. Step 2, the state has to actually deliver on that promise of compensation. At the same time, step 3 is pursuing that huge chunk of money from the central government. And then, kind of hovering over everything, is step 4, that potential legal action in the High Court, which could totally change the game when it comes to accountability. Now, to defend itself against all these accusations of inaction, the state government has its own argument. They're pointing to a pretty big number, 276 crore rupees. That's how much they say they've invested in flood control infrastructure over the last 3 years. Their argument is, hey, this proves we've been proactive, not negligent when it comes to preparing for this stuff. And that leaves us with this really difficult final question, doesn't it? On the one hand, the floods were triggered by record rainfall. That's a natural event, right? But then you have all these arguments about dam management, about preparedness, about the response, all of which suggests that human decisions played a massive role here. So in a crisis that's this complex mix of nature and human action, where does the accountability, the real responsibility truly lie? It's something to think about.